Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching. You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy,
etc.
Fanboy Nation.
Dot. I assume Tom.
This morning, I have the pleasure of speaking with Douglas Kelegian about his documentary, Peace for Armenia, The Plot to Destroy the First Christian Nation, which has 2 screenings at the Newport Beach Film Festival. First Sunday, October 20th at 5:15 p.m. at the Triangle, and Wednesday, October 23rd at 5:30 p.m. also at the Triangle. Douglas, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the plug. You did it better than I could have.
Listen, man, I'm Assyrian, you're Armenian. Our histories for the past 5,000 years have overlapped each other. There's still a carving in Armenia of the ancient Assyrian king and the ancient Armenian king toasting each other with wine to celebrate a peace treaty. So, multiple arguments of who came first as Christians, the Assyrians or the Armenians. Multiple arguments of, who did St. Thomas go to bring Christianity to? Was it the Assyrians or the Armenians? And at the end of the day, they're both Christian nations. They were both brought to Christianity by St. Thomas. They both suffered the same genocide of 1915 and continue with Artsakh now in Armenia, and then ISIS in the last couple of years in Syria and Iraq. So these parallels continue.
They do, and it seems like the conflict never ends in the region.
No, never.
It's pretty terrifying.
You have an interesting backstory with all of this because you decided at one point to do a DNA test and find out, although you aren't biologically Armenian, it's because your grandfather was adopted by his Armenian stepfather.
Very close. My father was adopted by my Armenian grandfather. And it's such a confusing story. About 8 years ago, I started looking into my Armenian background. I have an Armenian last name. Always thought I was a quarter Armenian. Have told so many people in my life that are Armenian, have felt Armenian. When I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh, maybe these features are Armenian. Maybe my thick beard is from my Armenian background. And yeah, just like you said, DNA tested my dad to try to locate where in Turkey our family had come from, just like pre-genocide or in the beginning of the genocide. And when those results came back, there was nothing in that area at all, either in the old Ottoman Empire or present day Armenia. And I just had to trace the story and figure it all back, figure out the story that my grandfather, who was certainly an Armenian, he raised my father as his own. So in a way, I guess we are, my whole family is Armenian. Whether that's by choice or through association, I don't know, but certainly feel Armenian.
Well, listen, once you're adopted into the family, that's your identity, no matter what the DNA test says.
Right. Identity is a tricky thing, I've come to learn.
Yeah. It's very interesting when people find out I'm a quarter of this, I'm a quarter of that. My cousin did the DNA test and I couldn't stop laughing at him because he's an immigrant. And I'm just like, what do you think you're going to find that's so unusual in being multi-generational from the region?
Right. Hey, you never know. Maybe someone came from abroad, moved over, might have snuck some DNA in there.
He found nothing. He found exactly what we expected.
That's the best case scenario. Let's be honest. I've been through the ringer, so.
Yeah. When you're intrigued in trying to find out about your heritage and then your adoptive grandfather's lineage through all of this, and now this resurgence of what's going on in Artsakh, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, and how Turkey still plays a role in the region, especially in the eastern part, if you want to argue where the line is between Eastern Europe and Western Asia, what do you start discovering in all of this? Because this conflict hasn't ended in the last 40 years. It's always been on a simmer.
Right. Here in the West, we don't hear too much about that region. We know that Turkey is a huge ally of the West. Erdogan is constantly visiting the West, and I think we do some weapon sales to them. But the deeper you go into this issue, the more you see that everything is really connected. On the east and west of of Armenia, you have Azerbaijan and Turkey, and they basically have similar economic interests. They have similar ethnic backgrounds, and they both have a long-standing their own conflicts with Armenia. And yeah, the deeper I went in this, I really saw that this is a coordinated front against Armenia to minimize their impact in the region. And we can go into detail about that.
Right. And it also doesn't help that Armenia is the Christian country landlocked between two Muslim countries in this situation.
Exactly. You know, that's a major part of this, I think, on the ground level. But then there's so many economic factors that play into this as well. So while it can seem like, oh, this is an ethnic thing, which it most certainly is, it's very multidimensional.
This is a very layered situation since the rise of the Ottoman Empire.
Exactly. And I'm sure there's some historians or some conflict experts out there who could summarize it better than I can, but I'm going to do my best here.
Right, but we're taking it from a macro level to a micro level with Peace for Armenia. How did the documentary come about? Because obviously you went into your own family research, but you're not on camera. You focus in on your buddy who decides, or who you decide to go with to Armenia and, you know, make this connection.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the original version of the film, I focus on my friend, my best friend, who I met in high school. He was my first Armenian friend. He was my first connection to the Armenian culture and language and everything. So the story follows him as he's like dealing with all these issues of genocide that's been weighing on his conscience since he was a kid. Kids in Armenian school and through Armenian television, they're taught about this genocide issue from a very young age. So that's weighed on him. But then also this like diaspora identity that he's had, where he's lived in California and he certainly feels to be an American, but like many other people who dual identities, he's felt very much Armenian. He speaks Armenian as a second language. He speaks it at home. He eats the Armenian food and he goes to a bunch of Armenian events. So he's very much Armenian. But feeling that sense of identity and living in California, separated from the homeland, he's felt like something has been missing in his life. So I follow him and I join him on his first visit to Armenia. And we kind of dive deep, and I kind of got the chills just like thinking about it. But I sat down with him several times in this trip to unravel what he's feeling and what he's going through, because it's certainly like a life-changing moment for him.
Right. And let's remind everybody, we're not against Azari people or Turkish people. People are separate from the government. This is a governmental situation that we can blame the Ottoman Empire. We can blame the Young Turks. We can't blame the Turkish guy that owns the kebab shop down the street. And I'm not saying this is hyperbole. There's literally a kebab shop down the street owned by a Turkish guy that I frequent. So this is not an interpersonal rivalry between us and them. This is historical and governmental.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more. You know, if you're only watching the news, it's easy to fall into this belief that people of different countries are our enemies, and they're all just like grouped into one. But no, another great friend I had growing up was Turkish. That this issue never got in the way of that. I don't think we should ever let political issues or historical grievances get in the way of how we treat one another.
Right. Because if life was so great back home, we wouldn't be here.
Exactly. And you know, and I don't expect many people on the other side of these issues to watch the film, though I would encourage it if you're of Turkish background or Azeri background. I hope I did justice to some of these conflicts. While I am seeing primarily on the Armenian perspective, I have tried to balance out the situation, or at least the historical perspectives. There's one slide in particular where I show that in the 1990 war with Azerbaijan, there were pogroms or massacres on both sides. There were massacres of the Azeri people and Armenian people as well. So I tried to tell the full story there, even though maybe some Armenian scholars or people would prefer I not mention that part of the story. But it is something to weigh out the whole situation.
Right. You're trying to be as balanced as you can. I mean, if it's coming from the Armenian perspective, but you're trying to be balanced, it still has to be like 60-40, 70-30 type deal.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm sure the criticisms will come in, and I'm totally open to hearing that as a filmmaker.
Was there any concern of your own safety with the release of this film, especially coming from whether it's either Turkish people or Azeri people, that they're like, here's this guy who's not even ethnic Armenian that's deciding to go in on this?
I've thought about this question a lot, leading up into these film festivals. So far, so good. I haven't received any hate. The film isn't publicly available yet, so maybe that has to that can explain that. But recently, I think it was this year or last, there was an Armenian cemetery in California that was totally set on fire. I don't know if you saw that in the news.
I didn't.
Or if you visit some of these Armenian genocide memorials, you'll see graffiti or like smashed rock or lights. So these grievances, while they are the source of them are far away from home, many of those people who hold beliefs on both sides of the aisle, they live over here and they express that anger over here. So yeah, I am starting to worry that somebody could like disagree with my film and want to I don't know, express that anger in some way. So I'm trying to be as cautious as possible, and that actually is the reason why I chose not to do a Q&A after the film. I want the film to speak for itself.
And there is a growing Turkish population in Orange County. I recently discovered this, so that will be interesting if any of them come to the film or protest the film or anything of that sort.
Yeah, and I haven't heard any rumblings of that, and I don't expect that. But yeah, again, if any Turkish people or Azeri people want to come see the film, I that's an open invite for them to come, as long as everyone is peaceful and friendly. And if they want to express their disagreements, I'm totally open to hearing that, as long as everyone's peaceful and open.
Right, and we'll all go get coffee afterwards.
Exactly. I have no reason to hate my neighbors out here in California.
The interesting thing with this was this also your first trip to Armenia along with your friend? Because, you could have gone multiple times before, not realizing that the direct bloodline connection wasn't there, but the cultural one was.
It was my first visit, and there was two moments that were really powerful for me. The first was we visited Georgia, in the city of Tbilisi, which is just north of Armenia. And there was a couple Armenian churches there that I visited. And when I visited there and spoke with the priests there, they were so open to having me and hearing my story, even though I'm not Armenian by blood. And it was a very emotional experience for me, like feeling like, I felt disassociated with this culture for so long, to then be like received with open arms, like, hey, yeah, no, you're still one of our brothers, come in and enjoy yourself. I remember like walking the gardens of one of the churches after and just feeling overwhelmed with emotion. There was another moment just entering our port and going through like the border security or visa checkpoint, and the guy looks at my passport and then looks at my face, and he's noticing a discongruence, and he goes, "Are you Armenian?" And I said, not in my blood, but in my heart." And then he looked at me and goes, "You're Armenian." So that was another big moment for me.
I will give Armenians this far more over Assyrians. If you're a half, if you're a quarter, if you just end up with the last name, Armenians are far more welcoming into the tribe than Assyrians are. So I commend you guys.
Really?
For sure. Yeah. Because we've felt so much genocide and oppression, and then, dealing with Kurds and Azeris and Turks and everybody else, and, having to be so isolated that there's this distrust of the other. It's not necessarily xenophobia. It's this, being so beat down and bogged down that you're just like, all right, you might be half, but you side with them more than us type deal. So at least that's thawing now. I'd say in the last 10 to 15 years, but prior to, it was very much that constricted aspect.
That is so interesting. I think I have a little bit of a kooky view on identity, like after having gone through all this. And an example of that is I went and taught English in China with the Peace Corps. So I was there for about a year and a half. And now after I've returned, even though I'm not Chinese, I have no Chinese blood or DNA or any of that, something inside me feels a little bit Chinese, like I can speak, an intermediate level of Mandarin, and like I know about the food and culture. So I don't know, identity isn't this clear-cut thing where you are the thing or you aren't the thing. I would say like maybe 3% of my soul is Chinese now after spending so much time there.
I get that. Yeah, culture is like we always argue about race, but it's really culture and the cross culturalism that matters far more than anything else, because that's where the real issues begin, is misunderstanding of culture.
Exactly. And maybe people will disagree with me when I say this. Like, I think it's better to view ourselves as part of the human race, and we can identify with certain cultures if we spend time and really have a genuine interest in those cultures.
Right. Well, there's this stand-up comedian named Won Ho Chun who is half Korean, half Vietnamese, but born in Saudi Arabia and grew up in Jordan. So he feels far more Arab than he ever does East Asian.
That's wild. Oh my God. I pity him for what he's had to go through to like contain all these identities inside.
I will send you the clip from when they did the Axis of Evil tour and how he breaks it to the audience in the Emiratis, and letting them know that he actually speaks Arabic and it wasn't just all in Korean. And it blows everybody away. Like, you have the spoiler of it, but like for the people in the audience experiencing it for the first time was mind-blowing.
Wow, that's amazing. Please send my way.
Yeah. So the documentary comes about. The original focus was your friend on his first trip in connecting from the diaspora into the homeland. And then all of a sudden, what happened 35 years ago is now happening yet again. And we never learn from history. This repeat happens. Russia's influence at the time, we're going back to the Soviet Union, was where people were forced to migrate around. So you couldn't hold these necessarily, identifying areas. You were just all Soviets no matter what. Creates this big issue between Artsakh, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, and how this Armenian region in what is now Azerbaijan is isolated from the rest of Armenia.
Exactly. So back when the Soviet Union was adopting Armenia and Azerbaijan into their country, I don't know if that's the correct term, adopting, but
let's be honest, conquering. The Soviet
Union conquering.
Conquering.
Yeah, that's probably the better word. It's funny. I feel like with these conflicts, you have to like really choose your words wisely, and I'm known for putting my foot in my mouth, so I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible. But a tactic which from my reading I've learned is the Soviet Union would carve out different territories and assign them to like kind of like enemy or opposing nations to keep their hands like meddling in different countries. So I probably articulated that poorly. Well, I'll just give the example.
No, you're very accurate. The Sykes-Picot Agreement did that in the Middle East, at the end of World War I, running borders through villages and communities and dividing people up that way. So Soviet Union didn't do anything different. They learned from the French and the British.
Exactly. So they carved out this territory called Nagorno-Karabakh, which was but overwhelming majority Armenian ethnic people. And then they said, okay, well, this is actually going to be part of Azerbaijan. They can govern their own territory as an oblast, as like as a Soviet oblast, but under the umbrella of Soviet Azerbaijan, and then under the other umbrella of the Soviet Union. So that was kind of a way to like ensure that the Soviet Union was always needed in this area. Otherwise, this conflict was going to spurt out from the ground.
No difference than Sykes-Picot in the Middle East. It's exactly the same.
Crazy.
Yeah. Because parts of Syria should have ended up being parts of Lebanon, but it's because they were Orthodox and not Catholic that they were placed on the Syrian side. The border between Iran and Iraq is mostly Assyrian and Armenian. That should have been its own entity, yet they drew the border there. So when the 1980 to 88 war between Iran and Iraq goes right through Assyrian and Armenian villages and like all this stuff. So it was just one big mess from the get-go.
Does it mirror the Artsakh situation where in the early 90s or like late 80s when the Soviet Union was falling apart, this conflict emerged because there was a weakening of the Soviet Union? Did a similar situation occur?
It was more so when the Shah of Iran was dethroned. and then the uprising of the political Shia versus the Sunni, between the Muslim factions of Iran and Iraq and the Persians and the Arabs, and then the Christians kind of just get stuck in the middle at the border.
Sounds like a familiar story.
Yeah. Politics, man, it never changes.
It doesn't.
So as the conflict grows for you guys and the narrative begins to transition out of something that was supposed to be documented as a first-time journey to now looking for a peaceful resolution, which we still don't have, and the diminishing of Christianity in the region by force, in this instance with Azerbaijan, how did that turnabout slowly change, and how did the narrative evolve for you in shifting that focus? Do we still have aspects of the original focus in the story as it shifts, or has it just been completely rewritten?
That's a great question, and I can tell you are great at analyzing films because just from the trailer, like you've picked out a major issue that I had to address as a filmmaker. It started out as this story with, me trying to understand my own identity. You have like a brief, like 1 minute segment of me saying why this story was created, me trying to understand what it means to be Armenian. And then that's told through Andre. But not like, I don't know if you call this happenstance or like serendipity, but on the way to the airport to LAX, I see a bunch of Armenian Artsakh flags waving. I go, what? That's strange. Like, I know this conflict is happening, but it wasn't like a central focus in the film, even though I was including some interview questions about this conflict. So I just pull over on the side of the road. I'm like risking being late for my flight to Armenia. And it's actually a protest outside of the Azeri consulate, run by this guy named Don Wilson Bush, who's actually a direct descendant from President Wilson. And he is protesting the Azeri consulate and creating his own little blockade to highlight the blockade that's happened in the Lachin corridor, the only road between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. So I went and interviewed them, to explain why they're doing what they're doing. But that was my first like key interview in relation to this conflict. So then I started thinking like, oh, this seems like it's heating up a little bit. So when I visited Armenia, I actually found a way to get to the Lachin corridor. I was looking down at the blockade with my very own eyes that you'll see in the film. Aliyev is denying the whole time. There's no blockade. There's no blockade. I stood on the mountaintop and looked at the blockade with my own eyes. And there was a line of trucks going up the mountain of essential supplies that needed to be delivered to the Armenians living in this territory. So I had to somehow weave together these two major plot lines. So actually you'll see in the film, Andre's story gets wrapped up by the end of part 2. And then this conflict in Artsakh carries the film to the very end, the end of part 3. So there's kind of this transition, or I like to view it as like a Venn diagram of like two overlapping stories.
It's interesting how that happens, but if it, in the final cut and it works out, because you whittled this down to 90 minutes, which I'm always surprised with documentaries, how you can take their like, oh, we had 6 months of footage, 90 minutes. And I was like, how do you do that?
Oh my gosh. And I just was able to shave off 10 more, and it's excruciating to have to do because there's so much meaningful content and meaningful stories that are told. So actually I'll give another plug. I'm going to be releasing this film on my YouTube channel at Douglas Kalajian, but then I've created a separate channel called, I believe, Behind the Story with DK, and there I'm gonna upload the full interviews. So I have like about 10 to 15 interviews I'm going to upload there, just so people can access and make sure that I've accurately depicted people's perspectives, but also because it's just great content and great perspective that would otherwise stay on a hard drive hidden away.
Right. Like this is going up as long format. The only thing that's going to be, cut out is that 3, 2, 1 countdown before we start the interview. And then like the awkward look of looking for the stop button at the end. Other than that, this is going
exactly.
We want people to understand what's going on.
Exactly. And then some of the interviews were interrupted, so I might have to like stitch some parts together, but otherwise it's going to be in long form.
And coming to Newport Beach Film Festival, this is the 25th anniversary of Newport Beach. It's a silver anniversary, quarter of a century. Like, we have to put how big 25 years is, on a stamp of everything. And to be a part of that in Newport with a large Middle Eastern population and a large Middle Eastern Christian population as well, and then the Armenian Apostolic Church just down the street from Newport Beach, I believe it's St. Mary's in Costa Mesa. That is helpful. Has it been promoted at St. Mary's or anything of that sort?
That's actually a great idea. I need to reach out to them. I met with a priest there long ago. He was probably the first interview I actually did for this documentary about 7 or 8 years ago. Unfortunately, that part didn't wasn't included in the film, but his interview is on YouTube. But I should reach out. That's a great suggestion.
Because I know there's two Armenian churches here. One is in Santa Ana, and then the other one in Costa Mesa, which is literally down the street from the Triangle. Like, it's about a mile away, if that.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. That's great. Yeah, I've reached out to several organizations, including the Orange County Armenian Professional Association, or Professional Society, as well as a few others. But yeah, I think I need to step up my promotion game a little bit.
Listen, we're a week and a half out. You got to get on this.
I know. Life is hectic. I'm actually getting married this Friday and then having a reception on Saturday. So it seems like, when it rains, it pours. So life is throwing me for a whirlwind here.
But in this instance, it's good. Congratulations on your nuptials. Are they going to be in Glendale, or is this going to be like a destination wedding?
We're actually going to do a small little courthouse thing and then just having a little party at my family's place.
You know what? Sometimes that's the way to go. Is like, have it as small as possible.
Exactly. And that's just who me and my fiance are. We're not trying to break the bank or taking out any loans for a party.
For people that don't realize, and this is slightly off topic, is that the smaller the wedding and the more intimate it is, the longer your chances of lasting are.
Is that true? Really?
Yeah. Because
Oh
the
my
people
God.
that have the big extravagant weddings, that go in debt and take a mortgage out on it, are just literally there for the party, not for the marriage.
Oh my God. I'll have to pass that info along to my fiance. She'll probably feel a little bit better about how low budget this is.
Yeah. Listen, man, it's for you guys. This is my reasoning behind it. Let's say if your grandfather is no longer with us, the people that didn't mourn with you have no business to celebrate with you at the wedding.
Right. I like it. And
That's
plus, she's from Puerto Rico, and instead of asking all the people from California to fly out to Puerto Rico, we've chosen to do like two little small things instead of one big thing. So I don't know. I think it's the right choice for us.
Listen, I'm happy for you. Congratulations, and especially a week before the festival, you're getting married. You're gonna have a two-front wedding, shall we call it, which is far better than what's going on in Armenia with a two-front war. As the documentary gets more attention, where was the world premiere, by the way, for this one?
It was actually at the Glendale International Film Festival last Sunday. It was a really small venue, comfy seats, but it was mostly friends and family for that. But to be honest, I kind of view the Newport Beach Film Festival as the premiere because it's a little bit higher status and have more people from Southern Orange County coming.
Right. And the Triangle Theater is a nice theater. It had been remodeled. It doesn't have the recliner seats. It still has the traditional stadium seats, but it's clean, it's nice, and I go there often.
Awesome. And Robert, I have to share, I've been going to the Newport Beach Film Festival for years. My dad works at Newport Lexus in Newport, and they were like a long-standing sponsor, and a lot of the after parties were held at Newport Lexus. So I've just like I've been a part of it while I've never like helped plan it or been an intern or helped out. I've always been at the parties. I've seen so many films at it. Honored to actually be a part of it. I feel extremely proud.
See how great that is to go from patron to now filmmaker.
Exactly. Yeah. I honestly like take me back 10 years when I first went for the first time. I never would have imagined I would see my film on the big screen. It's pretty surreal.
How exciting is it, on top of that, besides surreal, that you were able to produce a film. You get to go take this amazing international trip bordering Asia and Europe, and then come back and make something of it, because people have these dreams of one day I'll write the screenplay, one day I'll make a documentary, one day I'll make a TV show, or I'll write a stage play. And here you are, you did it. It's not like a dream anymore. It's become a reality for you.
Oh my God. Again, like I have no better word to say than surreal. I started this 7 or 8 years ago. I applied for like a big grant, spent a lot of time to get this like Fulbright Nat Geo grant that I was hoping to use those funds to create this story. And I got denied. And then a couple other little grants where again I was denied, and it felt like the universe didn't want me to do it. And I remember sitting in my car just like distraught when I received this denial or rejection email. And then I told myself, you know what, screw it. Why do I need someone else's approval or someone else's funding to do this story? I'm just going to save up X amount of dollars. I'm going to get my camera gear. I'm going to spend the next however many years getting better at this craft, so then I'm more prepared. And then I bit the bullet. And it's funny. I met my fiance 2.5 years ago. At my place of work, I was working with a disaster recovery nonprofit. And there came this moment where I told her this idea that I've had. I have enough savings to finally do this thing. But at the end of the day, it's a risk. It's a risk to quit your job and take a year off to do a project like this that has no guarantee of success. There's no guarantee that I can actually pull the thing off. But she supported me from the very beginning. She believed in the idea. And she said, you know what, like, we're going to get married, we're going to have kids and start a family. What better of a time to do it now when we have very little responsibilities tied to us? So
you found a good one.
Oh my gosh, like literally the love of my life, like biggest fan, supporter. And yeah, I have her to thank so much for this. And she's actually she's getting the other filmmaker pass with me at the Newport Beach Film Festival, because she very much earned that credit from all the reviews she's given me.
Nice. And is your dad coming, obviously, since he's in Newport?
Oh, of course. And he was completely rocked by this whole thing. You'll see there's a if you stay post credits, there's a little like Marvel ending scene where I took some old VHS footage of my grandfather to honor him in loving memory. So that's a really emotional moment for him.
I love that, man. Congratulations on that. I'll bring cigars just so we can celebrate your success with the film being at Newport.
That would be great, man. And look forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah. Where can we find you on social media, and where can we find the website? So if we can't be in Newport Beach, we can find future festivals to attend.
Great question. The website is peaceforarmeniafilm.com. The link to everything and all the key interviews that are there are listed. I'm also going to be publishing this on YouTube at Douglas. So it's the @ at Douglas Kalajian. That will be posted on November 11th. I was offered a few distribution deals for like educational, but I chose to go the YouTube route because I want this thing to actually be seen. If I were to give it to a distributor and put it behind a paywall, it would literally just be on a shelf gathering dust. So I chose to potentially go the less profitable route just to make sure this thing is seen. So if you're listening out there right now to this podcast, please visit the YouTube channel and give it a thumbs up.
Will there also be like, I'm a physical media guy. So would there be like a DVD or Blu-ray with bonus features, of some of these videos as well, or some of the stuff that doesn't make it onto the YouTube page or didn't make the final cut that we'd actually get to see as well in the future?
Like I mentioned, there will be the full interviews on that other channel, Behind the Story with DK on YouTube. As far as DVD, I've juggled the idea around, but I kind of want to see how the initial reception is. If it's gathering some steam, then yeah, maybe I'll do a little DVD copy there. But if you do want to support me financially, this project was entirely self-funded, and I'm actually back on the job hunt. But feel free to pop a donation to Venmo at Douglas Kalajian, or I have a Patreon I'm starting where I might be including some additional behind-the-scenes footage.
I love it. Douglas Kalajian, thank you so much for your time today. Let's remind everybody Sunday, October 20th, 5:15 p.m. at the Triangle. Wednesday, October 23rd, 5:30 p.m. also at the Triangle. Newport Beach Film Festival, silver anniversary. That's a quarter of a century, 25 years of the Newport Beach Film Festival. Come check out Douglas's documentary. Come hang out. And if you don't like cigar smoke, unfortunately, you can't hang out with us afterwards. But
Robert, really looking forward to having you out there and meeting you in person. And thanks so much for having me on the show.
absolutely, my man. We got to keep the Armenian Assyrian connection alive.